Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me today. Recently, I've posted a couple of polls where I've asked you guys what you want to hear more about. The number one topic was near-death experiences, and the number one question within that topic was some variation of this. How do we know that near-death experiences are not a deception? Or what do you say to people who believe that near-death experiences are a deception? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Talk to me in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. Check out my description box for other ways to get in touch with me and where to find me on social media. So there are two logical reasons why I believe near-death experiences cannot be a deception. Number one, if near-death experiences are a deception, then you have to take into account the scale that this deception is happening on. We are talking millions of people. This number is probably outdated by several years by now, but the last number I saw was 8 million people. Millions of people are having the same experience and being deceived. And this brings to mind the question that we asked and answered over and over again in our series on universalism. What is God like? What is God's character? Would a good God and a benevolent universe allow mass deception like this? We're talking men, women, children, irregardless of race, ethnicity, culture, language, background, sexual orientation, or religion. We're talking about people at their most vulnerable, when they've been injured so severely or are so sick that it leads to their death. Would God allow all of them to be deceived? And here's the key, to end up in hell forever. God allows a lot of things for a higher purpose. No question, God does allow people to be deceived. But most of the people saying that near-death experiences are a mass deception believe that God is allowing this deception on a wide scale to keep people from realizing that they are actually on their way to eternal damnation. Say, here, let's give them this warm, loving experience and deceive them from the truth that they're actually heading to hell. So essentially what they're saying is that God will allow people to be deceived into a horrific end that they can never recover from. And maybe this doesn't seem like a stretch for someone who's been raised in fundamentalist religion, who's been taught maybe since they were a child that God is going to allow mass deception in the last days here on earth, that God will allow most of humanity to be deceived and end up in hell. But I'd invite you to question that. What does this belief system say about God and his character? If there really is an eternal hell that people can end up in, and millions of people are having near-death experiences, a perfect opportunity to warn them about the truth of this eternal hell, yet God allows them to be deceived. Almost every single one of near-death experiencers. Why? What would the purpose be in that? Where is the higher good in that? Oh, Christian fundamentalism will respond, they didn't believe in God. They were living in sin. They had already rejected God or closed their hearts to God. They had already allowed deceptive influence in this life, so there was nothing that God could do about it. But that logic quickly falls apart when you realize that near-death experiences, statistically speaking, happen equally across religious backgrounds. How many people who have had near-death experiences are sincere, wholehearted Christians? Shouldn't at least these people, the ones who didn't allow deception and belong to God, be protected from deception in the afterlife? The truth is that to label near-death experiences as deception requires a lot of cognitive dissonance. You either have to be unaware of the facts surrounding near-death experiences, just how widespread they are and how similar they are across religious backgrounds, or you have to intentionally shut down some logical thinking. If most people, religious and non-religious, spiritual and non-spiritual, people from all religious backgrounds, people who don't believe in God, people who are angry at God, all of them have the same experience, the same basic underlying experience with the same message. The obvious answer is that these people are being shown the truth. God is good and benevolent and we can trust him. He is answering our many prayers for revival and for help and for change, and our many questions about why are we suffering and why does this and that evil happen in the world. He is answering all of this through the message of the near-death experience. The message that universal love is the answer to everything. This message is being sent back over and over and over, regardless of a person's religious background, because it is the truth. If near-death experiences were in fact a deception, then what we would expect to see is that, say, everybody who passes on, who say Christian or Muslim or whatever religion ends up being correct, these people either would not have a near-death experience ever, or they would have a different type of experience in which they're shown the truth, while the rest of the world would undergo the deceptive near-death experience. Fundamentalist Christians, for instance, if they are correct in their belief that most people will go to an eternal hell after they die, they would be seeing their beliefs confirmed in the afterlife because they would be immune to the deception, while other people would not. But this is not happening. So if near-death experiences are a deception, this deception is in no way connected to religious belief, because near-death experiences are universal. The message is the same across the board. The only way that such mass deception would be possible is if God is not good, and instead there is some nefarious being or group of beings in charge that does not have the best interests of Earth and its population at heart. The only way for near-death experiences to be a deception is if the entire message of the near-death experience about love, peace, unity is a deception. Everything good that the near-death experience promotes, all of it would have to be a lie, which means that the opposite of that, hatred, death, darkness, strife, that would be the reality of the universe. And we here would actually be in slavery and in bondage to an evil dictator of some kind, some type of evil higher power. And this, my friends, is impossible, because a being or system of beings that dark and that powerful to enslave and deceive the whole human race, and I'm not saying that beings couldn't be that dark or that powerful, but I'm saying if they were, they would be incapable of creating the beauty and the bliss and the love and the joy of the near-death experience. They would be too depraved to create something like that, because they would not have it within them. And I'm sorry that I can't prove this portion of what I'm saying to you. If you haven't had an experience, I know this is anecdotal, but anyone who has had a near-death experience or a spiritually transformative experience will tell you that it is more real, far more real than this life. This life is the dream compared to that. If the near-death experience is not reality, I can't imagine the ramifications of a deception that large. And I'm not trying to scare you guys. Obviously, I don't believe that's what's happening. I've stated over and over and over that I believe we live in a benevolent and safe universe, and that God is far bigger and better than we imagined, and that he can be trusted. But I'm just trying to stimulate thought on this issue. If we're going to say that near-death experiences are a deception, we need to think through the ramifications of that. The beings in charge of this would have to be unbelievably powerful and unbelievably evil. Is that the kind of universe that we're saying we live in? And how does a good and benevolent God fit into all of that? Is he too weak and powerless to stop this? Or is he standing by and letting it happen? And this actually leads me right into my next point, which is that if there were beings, evil beings, powerful and evil enough to accomplish something like this, they would not be sending back messages of peace, unity, love, and self-empowerment. Number 2, if near-death experiences were a deception, they would be sending a very different message. Let's back up a little bit. It is possible for spiritual beings to be deceptive. It is possible for spiritual beings to be very dark and very powerful and very deceptive. But deception has nothing to do with wrong religious beliefs. No two people hold the exact same beliefs. None of us have our beliefs exactly right. And the fact that we don't doesn't mean that we're deceived. It just means we don't know everything there is to know. In fact, compared to all that there is to know in the universe, the smartest among us actually knows very little. Not knowing or understanding something may affect us detrimentally, yes. For instance, if somebody doesn't understand the laws of gravity, they could fall off a cliff and die. If someone doesn't understand how to take care of themselves, they could develop chronic disease. If a person doesn't know what to expect in the afterlife, maybe they won't live their lives accordingly, and there could be negative ramifications for that. That's not deception. That just means the person has more to learn. A deceptive being isn't trying to get you to believe the wrong thing. Oh, let's get them to believe that hell doesn't exist so that they end up there. Oh, they didn't know. They were born into the wrong religion. They believed the wrong thing because that's what they were taught. And since they were off in their beliefs, I allowed them to have a deceptive near-death experience to keep them from discovering the truth. That's not the way it works. A deceptive being wants one thing, and is to control you so that they can gain power through manipulating you. A deceptive being does not want you to be at peace, empowered, and free. A deceptive being definitely doesn't want us to collectively realize our power. And since these things are the very heart of the message that near-death experiences convey, they cannot be a deception. The overall message of the near-death experience is God is love. Everything is part of God. We are all one, and we are all divine. This is the ultimate empowering message. This is not a message that a deceptive being would be communicating. Their goal is to manipulate you so they can gain the power for themselves. What deception looks like is people who bring a message of love, unity, and empowerment being silenced. Deception looks like the religious political system that was oppressing people for their own gain, crucifying Jesus Christ, because his message was empowering the common people. Deception looks like Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi, who brought messages of forgiveness and peace, being shot. What deception looks like is a higher power manipulating and oppressing people for the purpose of keeping us disempowered, divided, and at each other's throats. We see a perfect example of this happening today. So many people in the spiritual community right now think that getting that thing or not getting that thing in your arm means that you're deceived. Both sides accuse each other. Oh, those poor sheep. They're not awake. They're idiots. They're this, they're that. They're the problem. Actually, the deception is what causes us to think and say these things about our fellow human beings. The deception is the pointing of fingers. The deception is seeing a fellow human being as the other. Deception looks like disempowered, afraid, divided people. Truth looks like unified diversity. It looks like people being free to express their individual divinity and empowered and supported to do so. It looks like loving and accepting people even when we disagree with their choices. So what does this translate to in a near-death experience? In my opinion, a deceptive experience would look like one of two things. First, the experience could make you feel small, alone, afraid, disempowered, guilty, fearful. In my personal opinion, and this is just my opinion, but I think that hellish near-death experiences are a form of deception, because people find themselves alone, afraid, and disempowered. And as soon as they call out for help, they are transferred out of that experience and they are allowed to see the truth. The truth is that God's presence is everywhere. God's presence is in hell, yet we can't see it until we open our eyes. The truth is that we were never separate from God. The deception is that we were alone and lost. As long as we believe that and accept that, it will be real to us. But as soon as we are empowered to say, no, I don't want this, there must be a way out of here, we see the truth. 2, the experience could, rather than making you feel small and helpless, it could do the opposite. It could feed your ego. You're special in some way. You're the chosen one. We need you for a special task that makes you better than others. I've actually never heard of a near-death experience that communicates this type of message, but people have spiritual experiences like that here in this life, especially in the New Age movement. If an experience is leading you towards self-aggrandizement, you're probably being manipulated. If the experience communicates love, equality, oneness with all things, peace and unity through awakening and empowering of the individual self, it is not a deception. This type of message in no way benefits a dark entity. In closing, let's consider the worst case scenario, just to make sure that we've explored every angle here. Let's suppose that those who think near-death experiences are a deception are right. For the sake of argument, let's say that there are sinister beings who are attempting to deceive all of humanity for the purpose of getting them into eternal hellfire, where they can torment them forever and gain power off of their suffering. First of all, what kind of a universe is this? And where is God in all of this? But also, if this were the case, what I would expect logically is to see that this life on earth would be part of the deception. Then when people die, they would wake up, like in the Matrix, to discover that reality is far worse than they thought. In a scenario like that, it would be our responsibility to not just go along with the program so we can stay on their good side, like most people who suggest near-death experiences are a deception suggest. The answer is usually, well, become a Christian, follow the right religion, get it right now so that when you wake up over there, you'll be on the good side and you'll get the rewards. When in fact, if this was the reality, it would be our responsibility to stand up to this evil power. We would need to fight to overcome this system of mass deception and free the enslaved people. And this is, again, I'm not trying to scare anybody by laying all this out, but it's where I think people don't necessarily think things through. You know, we make all these movies like The Matrix, where people are asleep, people are deceived, they wake up to find themselves in hell. And what do? They come together. They become unified. They wake up to their own power and they fight the Matrix. They fight the deception. But then when it comes to real life, we just say, oh, let's just plug right back in. Let's just plug right back in and have whatever semblance of peace that we can get by making sure that we're on the side of those in power. All of that aside, this scenario that I've described is not what we see with near-death experiences. Sure, this earth is very hellish in some ways, and there are definitely powers at play trying to manipulate us. Anybody with any amount of discernment can see that. However, when we wake up in the near-death experience, we wake up to the fact that God and reality itself is so much better than we thought, and that we have the power to change things here on earth, and that the way to defeat the manipulation and the hells of the world is through empowerment of the individual, through universal love, through waking up to the divine in everyone and everything, through coming together and supporting one another. Once again, this is not a message that somebody who wanted to deceive and control us would be sending back. This is not a message that someone who wants to land us in hell and torment us for all of eternity would be sending us. Someone who wanted to land us in hell would be sending a message of guilt, shame, fear, disempowerment. They would want to keep us weak and divided, or they would be grooming people to manipulate others and do their dirty work for them. And while there are definitely powers at play that want to see us weak and divided, we see this clearly in the world today, right in front of our eyes. These messages are not coming from near-death experiences. The overwhelming message of the near-death experience is that we are divine. We are powerful. We are pure love. and we have the ability to change the course of events on Earth. The message of the near-death experience is wake up to who you are. Step into your power. Free yourself from the deceptions that you've believed and change the world through loving the person you're with, through simple acts of love and kindness, which will heal the world. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.